Evolution MX is a fully integrated accounting and job costing solution specifically designed for the construction industry. Today's session is going to concentrate specifically on the area of subcontractors, the management of your subcontractor database, and the handling of payments to them. Often the preferred method within Evolution MX could be through the use of dashboards. So a dashboard in the context of the subcontractors could provide for useful statistical information and reminders. My top left tile is giving me an indication that 15 of my subbies have got public liability insurance details that have either expired or will expire within the next month. You can set your own rules for the content of your own tiles. So whether they be for that purpose or for the awaiting verification for CIS purposes, for example, or whether they are a summary graph representation of statistical or financial information. You can control the content of these. There's a design mode available for you to be able to tailor your own tile contents. Tiles could also contain shortcuts to menu access elsewhere. So rather than having to rely on menu access, I could be using the bottom row of tiles I've got here to be able to navigate elsewhere in the system. If I use the menu system, I'll use the inquiry function to go and have a look at a particular subcontractor record. So you can browse for or search for a subcontractor depending on how much of its code you already know. I'll go straight into a particular subcontract and take you immediately to the main tab, which is where most of the main information or header information is going to be stored for that subcontractor. Just draw your attention to a couple of areas of interest. Top right, we were talking about the public liability insurance earlier. This is the certificate number now being stored by the system for that subby, and also the expiry date which was being used in that check to alert me to the fact that there was expiry due or had already happened. There are other areas of interest that could be there. You've got options for an agreement date, for example. So you might want to revalidate your subcontractors on an annual basis to make sure they're still up to standard. So you could record your own date on there when it was last done and the expiry date, and the system could warn you or nag at you if you try and engage them beyond that time. Other areas of interest here could be the tax tab. Now, for the purposes of the UK, we've got CIS involvement here. For the Irish Republic, there's RCT. So we're able to cater for both regimes here. For CIS purposes, we are storing the UTR number, and we've also got a verification has been come back from HMRC, indicating that this subby is now to be recognised for net CIS tax deduction. You can repeat the verification process directly as often as you want to from the system without having to go separately to the website. You can either do that on an individual subby basis, or there is a menu option which allows you to do all subcontractors. And it also includes the 2-year ruling. So if you've had a subby who's been dormant with you for the last 2 years, you will be expected to re-verify them before you can make a payment. The history button there will just give you a breakdown of previous engagements for the attempt of verification and tell you what the results were. And there's also a further tab to the right hand side for skills and operative accreditations. That's for you to decide whatever else you want to store against the subcontractors. So typically CSCS card details might be required. You can, in a similar way to the public liability insurance, store the card number and the expiry date. And you could have as many different skill codes as you want, representing what you need in your industry for trade qualifications, accreditations, qualifications, and so forth. The whole concept of Evolution MX surrounds subcontractor orders. As we'll see on this subcontractor, we've got a number of orders. So this is for every engagement you've got with the subcontractor where you want to manage the payment to them underneath that order specifically. So in my example here, I've got contract number being shown as the first part of the column on the left. So job number 0737 has got 2 separate orders for the same subcontractor. So the top one might be the main engagement. The second one might be a variation, for example. So you can put as many different orders as you want to onto the system for the same contract for the same subcontractor. It's not always necessary to have a order specific to a contract if you don't want to. If you've got labour only subbies, for example, that may flit around from job to job on a frequent basis, then you can have a multi-contract order. And then you just can post all costs for any contracts against that same order. It just won't maintain visibility within the order as to which job they've been working on. Okay, also the figures for each of these orders is being shown. So the order value agreed, the value that's been applied for so far, gross certified, outstanding, retention and payable, and so forth. Okay, so all that information is stored for you against a subcontractor. You've also got down towards the bottom, you've got a document button, which would allow you to see all document that's had so far been created and stored against this particular subcontractor. Now, this could include largely the documents that Evolution MX has created itself for the purposes of payment certificates and subcontractor statements that have been sent out to them on a regular basis. So they could be displayed in a form such as this, or you could choose your own display to say, I'd rather see them in a more meaningful summary view where I want to be able to see the document type as the primary heading. So that will now group together for you all documents of the similar nature. So all of my certificates, for example, are grouped together. If I want to have a look at a particular one, I could highlight it. And then with the use of the detail tab, it will give me a preview of what that certificate looked like when it was produced and sent out, probably via email. It's now been stored in the system. So you've got a complete library of everything for all payment certificates. And in a similar vein, you'd have all of the statements as they were produced and run. There's no extra effort on your part to be able to get those documents stored. They will just happen as you go about your normal day-to-day business. But you can use that document feature as well to introduce other documents, such as proof of the public liability insurance details or any accreditation certificates and so forth. Anything else that you want to store against a subcontractor could be involved within that document section. Okay, the way that you would interact with your subcontractors then would obviously depend on the nature of the subcontractor. And by that I mean we've got different posting options for you. There's a timesheet, which could be suitable for labour-only subcontractors. That's where they may present you with a timesheet that's got a combination of different jobs for different hours, different dates. And you could either input those against a subcontractor using the multi-contract order I talked about earlier, or you could use an import function. So from a CSV or an Excel file, if that's presented to you, we'd be able to put a mapping mechanism in place to recognize the format of that spreadsheet and import it for timesheet purposes, and then ultimately payment to your subcontractors. Postings could be used for payment applications that are put on the system that would then go into a workflow, and I'll come back to that section in a moment. Or it may just be you're going to raise a payment certificate without it necessarily being preceded by an application. The invoice register then is what I'm going to use first of all to show you how you could deal with an invoice that's being presented to you by a subcontractor. Now to do this, I'm going to make use of dashboards. So my dashboard here is all about subcontractor invoicing. For those of you who have used the purchase ledger invoice register, it's very similar, but we can separate it out and have a different email address being looked for subcontractor invoices distinctly separate from the suppliers. So this is recognizing immediately that I've had 4 invoices received under my monitored email address. If I click into that, I'll be able to see exactly what those 4 invoices are, where they've been received from, if they've come in via email. And if I highlight one, I'll get a preview of it on the right-hand side. So I haven't needed to print these from email. They have been automatically stripped off as attachments from the email and been presented to me on a to-do list. So I could then pick this up, this first example, be able to see it more clearly now on the left-hand side of the screen. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, I've got my ability to input the details for it. Now, this is what we call entry-level invoice register. So this means that I'm being presented with the image of the invoice, and I'm going to use the right-hand side to input my own details. There is an option to consider called OCR, or optical character recognition, which could do the clever bit of reading the invoice, working out who it's from, and then making suggested postings to you on the right-hand side. If you're interested at all in that, then we'd be happy to talk to you on an individual basis. So I'm just on this occasion going to indicate who the subcontractor is. So I can search for or just start making an entry to be presented with a suitable matching list of subbies. Notice immediately I'm being told there in the yellow warning that the insurance has expired for the subcontractor. It's not stopping me from going any further. It's just giving me a warning to say tread carefully. The order number then that I'm going to post this invoice against is selected using the drop down. There's a list of all of the orders that I've got for this particular subcontractor. Notice the use of the multi-job one at the top that we talked about earlier. And I've got a couple of jobs at the bottom here for the same contract, 1035 on 2 occasions. So I'm going to use one of those to post this invoice against. So calling it up will then expect me to fill in the rest of the details. So what date is it? The accounting period it relates to. The due date is going to be automatically suggested based upon the terms that you've set for that subcontractor. I can here just record the invoice number, and then I'll also put in the net value for the invoice. Now, at any point, I'm able to save what I'm doing and return to it later. So if you're not sure how to fulfill the input of the invoice because you're missing some details, you can just save it and come back to it later. to that same tune, you could also place it on query. So if you aren't sure what to do with it, but you know somebody else who might be able to help, then you could use the place on query function. That would allow you to add any additional notes and then select the person that you want to send the query request to. Now, these may be users of your Evolution MX system, in which case they could access the system through an approval menu and see everything that's been sent to them, or they may simply be email recipients. So you don't have to have a license for everybody who may just need to receive an odd query now and again. So if you do select it as a query, then that will be sent via email to the recipient. They can then just reply to the email, and then as the administrator, you'll get the response back, and then you can deal with the query and progress it from there. Okay, I'm going to go into further down the show cost allocation. That's where I can now tell the system what that £300 relates to. Royalties, I'll just save that first, and then we'll come back into it. Okay, so we've got the invoice as it was presented. Details so far recorded. I'm returning to them to carry on. I'll just use the show cost allocation to be able to go in and see what I'm doing with that £300. That then displays me, based upon the order, the content of the lines that were part of that order. So in terms of splitting it, for example, between labour and material, day rates and so forth, the content will be shown for you, and then you'll be able to make the entry as to what this payment represents. So this was a 2-line order. There could be multiple lines on an order. There's no limit to that. It's telling you previously what has been processed against this order for this subcontractor. This bottom half of the screen can be fine-tuned so that it's displaying the information that you want to be able to see. I'm highlighting also in yellow where it's possible for me to make an entry. So I could be saying on the top line for measured work, for example, I'm going to record of that £300, there's going to be a couple of hundred related to the measured work. So that's allowing me to interact with it, drawing my attention to the fact that that's where the figures can be input. Warning there saying that the measured work has exceeded the budget. What that means is that the order value has been exceeded. And as you can see, I was already over the order value on that particular line. So it's just a further warning or nag at you to say, tread carefully. I may want to accept the retention or alter that. That's showing me how the calculation is being made. I've got ability to input those fields, or just leave it as it is on that particular line, and then maybe put a remaining amount on the bottom line for the material side of things. Okay, with nothing left to allocate, I'm now good to go on that invoice. I've got the ability to stretch the screens to suit. So if I want to be able to see more of the top half of the section, I can do, for example. I could now submit that, and that could post off to the ledger ready for payment, or I could choose to pass it through a workflow. Now, workflow is similar to the query. Difference here is that once you pass it into workflow, you don't necessarily see it again. It'll just pass through to whoever you sent it to, and then once they have approved it, it'll then pass through to the ledger. So it's kind of rubber stamping it, giving it approval to be paid, rather than questioning its content. So without that, I can just submit that, and it will post it off to the ledger, and then make it available for the next pay run to pick up and make the payment to the subcontractor. Okay, so let's move now to our purchase order section. Sitting on the main menu, I've got my purchase orders, and within there is a section specifically designed around the subcontractors. So I'll enter a new order. So I could again browse or search for a contract number, or just input a number and then automatically grab the next number. Not going to spend too long on the purchase ordering side. That is the subject of separate webinars that we've got recorded. So I'm going to go relatively quickly through this just to record a subcontractor order. So I could be making an indication as to who's asked me to raise the PO if it's not me myself. Okay, now again at this stage, I'm being troubled by the fact that that insurance has expired. So there's every opportunity to be told about the fact that there's an issue with the insurance. You can turn that off if it's not going to be of any interest, but most people like to have it there. So at the bottom, I'm going to go into the category and be able to make up the content of what this order needs to cover. First of all, I'm just going to confirm to the system that we are going to be putting an application through, or an application will be received against this order. So no values necessarily associated here. This is just allowing us to confirm that an application will be in place. I can then build up the content of the order based upon whatever you've set as work categories. So this is a database available for you to put in as much detail as you want. They can just be summary explanations and you can add further details to them. They could be specific about a project that's being worked on. So if I were to call up measured work 1, that'll bring me up any standard description I've set alongside that, but I could overtype that or I can copy and paste into that to give fuller details as to what the work is expected. If I go to the value, I'll just key in the value required for that particular line and recognize the terms that have come through from the defaults set on the subcontractor. So they've got a 10% retention expectation. I can either accept that or lower it or remove it. Their VAT rate default is being suggested as well. And the system will also be able to distinguish between labour and materials for the purposes of CIS tax deduction. Over on the right hand side, the including tax set to yes for my labour is going to mean that is subject to CIS. If I were to go to category and maybe pick up a different line for materials, you'll notice that's been set to no. So that can all be prepared ahead of the payment, just as it knows where to make that deduction. Okay, I'll just put on a second line there for the order. At this point, I am good to go and I'm going to email this order out. Prior to doing that, I might want to CC it so I could copy in the site manager or the QS, for example. I might want to attach another document to it. So maybe it's a fuller breakdown of the work expected, or maybe some illustrations, diagrams, photos, or whatever it might be. So by using the document button, you can just drag and drop additional documents to go out with the email and be stored with the order. If I print, it's going to just update. It will be checking to make sure I've got authority to raise an order of that value. So you can set thresholds which allow for the processing of orders without further authorization, or maybe where they do need to. If I've gone above a 5,000 threshold, for example, then it may be expected to seek authorization before that order can be dispatched. It's entirely up to you how you use that authorization levels, if at all. Now this is going to create me the order. It's going to email the order out. It's also going to put an all-important committed cost visibility against the contract to which this order relates. So contract 0737 will now have visibility of an additional 1,500 quid's worth of committed cost by virtue of this purchase order I've just put on. That means you don't get the nasty surprise necessarily coming through where you have no prior knowledge of the fact that you've got an order engagement already raised for the subcontractor. Okay, so I've got an order on the system. What I'm going to do is for this subcontractor is we are going to process an application. So back to the subbies ledger itself and through the postings menu this time, I'm going to go into post transactions. Now this is a multi-purpose option, which could be for postings of various different types of transactions. I'm just going to use the application option for now. Okay, I'm going to be then selecting who the subcontractor is. I've got another warning here about the insurance because nothing's been done about that yet, so that's not going to go away until that has been rectified. I can then select the order that I want to place the application against. So this will browse now on all of the orders that I've got for that subcontractor. The ones you saw earlier, but also the addition of a third one for that same contract is showing there for a value of 1,500. So I can select that as an order, record any other document details or referencing that the subcontractor has issued, maybe have an image that's been scanned of the application that I could now attach. And then all I need to do at this point is record the value of the application. So if we're saying it's 1,200, I don't need to have the breakdown put in at this point. So this could be more of an admin role rather than necessarily something that the contract manager or QS has to do. Because all I'm going to be doing is recording the fact there is a £1,200 application being made. If I say OK, that will then update. That will put it against the order. It will also potentially update the true cost on the contract if you want it to. That is a system option that you can decide to use or not. It may just be a memorandum figure that sits against the contract, or it might be a true cost. So what has happened there is it has recognized that there's authorization required because I have got present the authorization of payments module. I have been recognized also as being the QS on that particular contract. So when I go into AOP and I call up the authorization of payment, I will see all of those applications that have been logged on the system that require me as the QS to step in at the first level of approval. Now you can decide who leads the approval, whether this is QS or the contract manager, and indeed whether they both need to be involved. Maybe it is only QS requirement or only contract manager. So as a company, again, you can make that decision. I'll be able to see now that I've got a new application that's come through for the 1200. So if I double click on that, that will now load the application with me. Now I've got columns representing the different lines that were on the purchase order. And I can see on the left-hand side what the application value is, 1200. Down towards the bottom right, you can probably spot the order value, which was the original 1500. So I can now, as the QS, say how much of that order I want to progress through to potential payment by the accounts. But notice the calculations are being done based upon the order content in terms of the retention and VAT and so forth. You can make amendments to these in the white areas as the QS. You could even do a write-off. So if the 1100 is as much as you're going to pay on this particular request, you could write off the remaining 100. Leaving it alone means it will just pick it up and potentially be available to be included in the next pay run. So you can split the amount to be paid between the different lines of work categories that were put onto the purchase order. You might want to record some information about maybe why you're not paying the full amount. So this could be an indication of a shortfall in payment, because we've got the ability to be able to produce a payment notification, which could advise the subcontractor of any shortfall and why that is. If you want to supplement that with any other internal notes, you can do so, where the subcontractor is not necessarily going to be able to see those. So you can use those for internal purposes only. If I say OK, that may be the end of the approval, and it may now pass through to accounts to raise a payment certificate. In my case, it's just giving me another warning to say I've gone over the budget on terms of the order value for measured work, but I'm happy to go on with that. And it's also going to now prompt me for who that second level is. Now, it may be that you don't need to be prompted, because for a contract, it always knows who the second level is. So it could be set as an automatic pickup from the contract definition who the contract manager is. We've allowed for this to be variable. This is a system option you can enable or not, as the case may be. So I'm going to pick myself as the second level, come out of that particular area and go into the sign off of payment. That is now going to present to me as the contract manager all of those that have gone through the earlier stage of AOP, or authorization of payment. So all of those that have been approved by the QS so far. I'll call the one up from the list, be able to see what the QS has put into it already. So remember, he was responsible for putting in the figures that were to be agreed and then pass ultimately through to the payment. So I'm going to be presented with what he is suggesting is to be made. I don't have to necessarily agree with it. I've got the option of being able to just accept or override and reject the suggestion, so that it goes back to the QS. Notice though, my figures are not available to be amended, so I can't get into any white fields to put in the entries in. I can make some internal notes if I'm not happy, and then just reject it so that it goes back to the QS, and then it can ping pong backs and forwards between the two parties until they're both happy with it. Just getting a further warning about the order value being exceeded. Okay, that's the end of the approval process, and could now move on to the printing of a sign-off document. We say printing, probably going to email it. It is a document of your choosing as to what you call it. We call it a payment notification. It can be presented in the form that you want. So if you were to put it through for the subcontractor version rather than the internal version, it'll then present me with an illustration of what that payment notification could look like. So it's not the payment certificate, it's just advanced notification to the subby, telling them what they're going to get paid and when they're going to get paid it. As I say, you can head it up to call it whatever document you like. It's showing the job number, it's showing the order value, 1500 over on the right hand side. It's indicating how much has been requested through the application, how much has been certified, any deductions that are subject to be made, and also any notes that you added in for the subcontractor's benefit. So that is then pending, waiting for accounts to now step in and take it on to the next stage. So they would then go through the postings option, post transactions. This time I'm going to take the option to post a certificate rather than the application. And I'm also going to take the option to say pay authorized yes, which means only pick up on those applications that have passed through the AOP and are now ready to be paid. So as an accounts user, I'll pick up on the application waiting to be paid. I can see the figures that have so far passed through the approval process. I have some freedom here in being able to make some entries or amendments. So I've got the option to be able to override any CITV levy, for example. The taxable amount is also available to me as well, because on this occasion, I was able to split what was labour and what was materials. That's not always possible. You may just have a single column, so you may want to reduce the taxable element because some of the value may be related to materials. You can also change the VAT status and also an option for a contra where you could reduce the payment if there's been use of uniform or tools or vans, for example. So if I just accept it as it is, the beauty of this is, as an accounts user, you're not having to scratch your head and wondering what on earth you're going to pay for it, because it's already gone through an approval process. So we can just complete it by saying OK. That is now good to go and become a payment certificate pending payment. It would then just be an accounts function to finish that off by going through the certificate payment update, where final checks will be made about the CIS status, for example. You could be saying, I want to look at all certificates which are now due to be paid between, say, now and the end of next month. It's then a case of checking on it. So it's not going to let me pay that top one because you'll notice there the CIS details haven't been verified. But I've got as far as this, being able to process something, but it's just not going to get paid until we've satisfied that final check. Only one I'm interested in for the time being is going to be that bottom one, but you could select multiple payment certificates to be raised at the same time. I'm going to be paying by backs as well. So that's going to allow me to produce a bank file format of my choice. We set this up for you in advance. So whether it's one of the main high street banks or somebody else will be able to say which bank you are expecting to communicate with, and then printing that backs payment will actually create the backs file that you can then upload through the banking software. The other aspect to be made available is the printing of the remittance stroke certificate, which will be actually an emailing out of that. This is going to be a representation of what the payment certificate could look like. Your logo can easily be added to the top left of that, and that is now detailing to the subcontractor exactly what they're being paid, any deductions and so forth. And if there is a reverse charge requirement to be stated, that can be included as well. So that is the payment complete. That will update now the document library as well. So you'll get an additional payment certificate visible through the subcontractor, but also through the contract to which that relates. All that information is available through the contract inquiry side of things. So if you wanted to go in through my contract ledger and have a look at a contract inquiry, we'd be able to call up that same job we've just been looking at and see evidence of activity in relation to what we've just been doing with the subcontractors. So on contract 0737, we've got a summary view of our subcontractor cost and also a budget associated. So we can see how close we are to adhering to the budget. If I wanted to drill down on that, then I can go into more detail to break down on the subcontractor to see exactly how much we spent with whatever different trades there may be. And if you wanted to expand upon any one of those, you could do, or just double click and you'll be able to see full transactional details relating to each of those. So the top entries are the ones I've just been doing with you, the certificate, the application and so forth. And if you wanted to, you could drill down into those and retrieve copies of the document images. So that was quite a quick run through of the sub-B processes that we can offer to you within Evolution MX. I hope it's been some interest to you. If there's anything I've not covered in enough detail or you want to ask us any further questions, then please let us know and we'll be happy to engage with you on a one-to-one basis. But thanks for your attention today.